Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the barn out here at St. Bernard Acres. This is Friday, November 8th, I believe. Late in the day, it's probably around 5 o'clock or so. It'll be dark out here pretty soon. But I'm not too worried about that. I have lights in the barn now. So what I'm trying to do here is get insulation ready. This is the 24-inch insulation for the ceiling in the barn, or in the building. And they're just 2x4 trusses, so I got the R13 fiberglass insulation. I would love to afford that, be able to afford the Ruxol stuff that people brag about, but I can't afford that yet. So I had to get this stuff. But I'm cutting it into bats because if you remember how I framed the ceiling in there, instead of going straight up with it like that, I go up 48.5 inches. Then I go straight across another 88 inches. So what I'm doing, I'm cutting these angle pieces right now. I need 26 of them. And then I can just take them in and staple them up. I won't be inside the closed-in building on my knees on the floor cutting this stuff. But I need 26 of them at 54 inches. So I'm going to get those cut. And I thought, while I'm cutting this, I could do like a story time video for you. It's been a while since I did one. And I had deleted my Facebook account. I'm taking a break from Facebook. Mainly because most of my family members are bleeding heart liberals. And all of the whining and crying and complaining about the fact that Trump won. So I said, you know what, I'll just take a break from it for a while. And I did a backup of all my posts. So over the years, I probably had a Facebook account for 15 years. I don't know. But I wanted all the pictures and all the posts I'd made, you know. So I did this backup. And I got them all, and I was going through them. And I found something in there that reminded me of my best friend who died in 2010. And I thought I would share his legacy, if you will, while I'm doing this. Now, I had rolled into Houston, Texas. I hitchhiked in. I was homeless. Didn't know anybody. And I went to stay at the Salvation Army. And at the Salvation Army, you got, and what I've got is a mark here on this makeshift table at 54 inches. And I'm cutting them to that mark. I put them at the edge of this table and I cut them to that mark, which makes sense. Anyway, so I got to Houston, and the Salvation Army, at the time, you got 2 nights for free. You could stay there. And then it was $3 a night after that. And well, I got 6 of them out of a roll. Nice. So you get 2 free nights, and then it's $3 a night after that. Well, the nice thing about that Salvation Army there was a labor pool across the road, across the street from the Salvation Army. And by labor pool, I mean that's like, I don't even have to cut this last one. It's pretty near almost close. So I get 7 of these out of a roll. I only need 4 rolls. Yeah, where was I? a labor pool. It was day labor. They woke you up at the Salvation Army at 5 o'clock in the morning, and you went over there. They have these tickets. You go out. All these companies call and say they need help for a day or 2 days or whatever, and the labor pool takes you to that location. You work your 8 or 10 hours, whatever it is, and then they come and pick you up at the end of the shift, take you back to the office. You get your pay, and you go about your way. So you got paid daily. That way I could get my pay, and I paid $3 to stay at the Salvation Army and take a shower and everything and get something to eat. Then the next morning, go out and get on another thing. I went out on all kinds of different jobs and different companies. And I went to this place called Continental IMSCO, out off, if you're familiar with Houston, out off of Hempstead Highway. And this was 1978, to put it in perspective for you. It was an oil field supply warehouse, and they took 6 people a day. So they would take us all out there in the morning. We'd work our 8 hours, then they come and pick us all back up. There was another guy that was on that same ticket on a daily thing. He wasn't staying at the Salvation Army. His car had broken down about a mile or so away from the labor pool there. So he would walk up there. He was staying in his car. So even back then, there were homeless people. And, you know, I met him through the labor pool. And he was a pretty mean fella, a pretty nasty person. Bad attitude, you know. Not my kind of guy at all. You could tell he was a drunk. He was an alcoholic. And one day he came in. We all went to work. And he was being particularly nasty and rude to everybody. So I went up to him. He was a short guy, about that tall, you know, not very big. I went up to him. I said, let me tell you something, dude. If you can't stay out all night drinking and partying and doing all your stuff and report for duty the next day and be nice to people and cordial to people, then you need to give one of them up, because you don't need to treat people like this. There's just no need to do that. And he looked at me and walked away. So we went ahead and did our jobs, you know. 5 o'clock, we're all out there waiting on the van to come and get us. Here he walks over to me. I'm like, oh, shit, now it's on. And he was like, you want to go have a beer after we get back? Like, yeah, I'll do that, because there were bars all down through there and everything. Like, yeah, we'll do that. So we get back, collect our money. We go down to this bar. And we're sitting there talking. He said, first thing I want to tell you is nobody in my life has ever talked to me that way and walked away from it unscathed. Just so you know that. And I'm like, well, you know, if we got to fight, we got to fight. You know, if I don't whip your ass when we're done, you're going to know you were in a fight at least. Let me put it that way. So, you know, we were talking, we got along. He was telling me, you know, he was in the Army. He was 13 years older than me. He was born in St. Mary's, West Virginia. He's telling me how he was in the Army, did 3 tours in Vietnam, and blah, 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 blah. Got out after 16 years. Right, I thought that was kind of funny. Why do you get out after 16 years? He was staff sergeant and won all this shit. You know, I'm like, all right, whatever. You know, he bought the beer, so I'll listen to his tales, you know. Well, time went on. We became friends, right? The company, that Continental IMSCO company, wanted to hire us full time. We were very good employees. They wanted to hire us full time. And it's like, well, I wanted a full-time job, but I don't have any money. I'm working out of this labor pool to save up enough money to get a little bankroll together and get a place to live, because if I went full-time with Continental IMSCO and became their employee instead of the labor pool's employee, I'd have to go 3 weeks before I saw a paycheck. So they said, okay, well, you tell us when you're ready and we'll put you on. I'm Like, well, that's pretty cool. So it took a few weeks. I got enough money. Well, John and I were working there, and across the street was a bar, the Social Circle. That was the name of the bar. Behind the bar was a trailer park that had rental trailers, right? So we'd managed to save up enough money to rent a trailer in that trailer park behind the bar. So we were pretty well set up. I mean, our trailer was here, the bar was here, across the street was where we worked. It was perfect. And the barmaid, the daytime barmaid, liked me, and she always brought lunch for me every day. At lunchtime, I'd walk across the street to the bar, have my lunch because Jenny brought it to me. And, it was all good. Didn't have any problems. And so John and I have moved into that trailer. And then I see his DD-214, right? And sure enough, this dude was not lying. He was Green Beret, Ranger, Airborne Ranger, was awarded a Silver Star, a Bronze Star with a V device, which is Valor, a Purple Heart with a cluster, and the one he was most proud of, I think, was his Combat Infantryman badge, right? And he really did 3 tours. He went in to the Army in 1962, and that's where he started smoking dope. That was in 1962 when he got to Vietnam in 62. So I'm like, wow, the dude really, he wasn't lying to me. So now I'm really curious about why only 16 years. He was a staff sergeant when he got out. So John had, as did I, if I ever got it diagnosed and was willing to go get it diagnosed, because of our upbringing, I've mentioned a few times how, we were raised, had PTSD really bad. And before PTSD was the designer diagnosis it is now. Everybody who gets their feelings hurt files for PTSD. He had issues before he ever went in the service. The service just compounded some of it. And you could tell, I mean, we both were like that. We couldn't hold jobs, but we were very good at what we did. And what would happen is we worked at Cumberland for probably another 4 months. I quit and went and got a job at another warehouse somewhere, and then hired John the following week. We'd work there for 3 or 4 months, quit, go somewhere else. John would get a job somewhere. Then he'd hire me. That's just because we partied a lot too at the club there, the bar. And he, at one point, he went to work for this Wesco equipment company. They did valve automation for the oil field. The oil business was the big thing in Houston back then. And their warehouse was in bad shape. And John said, look, if you hire this guy, Joe Waller, we will redo this entire operation in 90 days and have it running smooth. Right? And John called me and I went over there. I'm like, dude, 90 days you said we would do this? So back then, speed consisted of White Cross and Pink Hearts and Black Mollies and our Black Beauties and, all this kind of stuff. So we're doing this speed. We're working 16, 17 hours a day. But at the end of 90 days, they had a perfectly smooth running operation. And we quit there and wound up somewhere else. In the trailer, right, I would move a girlfriend in. She would last about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, right? Because she would cook and she would clean and stuff. And she'd say, you guys are nuts. And she'd leave. Well, then John would move a girl in. She'd last a few weeks and she'd be gone, And that's just the cycle we were going through. So we go on. We eventually open a bar up, open up a nightclub and everything. I wound up meeting Gail, getting married. John was living with this one girl named Pat. That was a trip. So Gail and I, we had Nick. We wound up moving up to Cincinnati. A few months later, here comes John to Cincinnati. And him and Pat had split up like everybody before. And he worked with me in Cincinnati for a few months and then went off somewhere else. So I called his sister, Bonnie, back and asked her, I said, look, John was here, because we had kind of stayed in touch, right? I said, he was here for a while, but now he's gone again. I don't know where he went. And she said, well, he's, come down here and is living with a girl here in St. Mary's. I said, okay. Well, she had started looking into what she could do. This was back around 2000, late 1990s, something like that. And she got a hold of John's records. He had been stationed, his last duty station was Fort Hood in Killeen, Texas. And he was getting ready to retire. I mean, he had done his 16 years. And he had bought some apartment houses there and some rental houses. So he was setting himself up to retire from the Army. And his wife left him, took his kid, left him for his best friend, and they moved to Germany. John got into drugs and alcohol and lost all of his apartments, lost his houses, So Bonnie managed to get all of his records. And she found within his records a request from John to the Army for help with his alcoholism and his drug addiction. And in there was a response by his commanding officer before he forwarded it on that said, the Army doesn't need men like John Boley anymore. Discharge him. So they just booted him out because they didn't need him anymore. The war was over. Everything was done, Well, that wasn't too good. I don't know how many of you remember, there used to be a senator here in West Virginia named Robert Byrd. He was quite the character, but he loved veterans. He worked his butt off for veterans. And somehow she got that note in his records up to Robert Byrd. And I'm telling you, 6 weeks later, John got 4 years of back pay at E8 rate. 4 years. And a honorable discharge at 20 years. They had, filled out his 20 years. So, and he got 100% disability with it. So then he got 17 years, somewhere around there, 13, 15, 17 years of back retirement pay. A huge check he got. So John, being John, took that money, went to Belize, and bought a bar and got addicted to crack cocaine. Right? He was down there for a few years. The bar got wiped out by a hurricane. He had no money. So time passes. In 2008, I start searching for John. I'm trying to find him. Bonnie, unfortunately, died in 2005. So I'm searching. We have the internet then. So I'm searching the internet, and I keep doing all this stuff. And I found a post that somebody had made named Bonnie Jo Boley. And she had said she was born in Houston, Texas in 1985 and was looking for John A. Boley, because that was her dad. And she had never met him. I'm like, well, that's pretty odd, So I messaged her, told her who I was. I said, John and I were best friends for, since the late 70s. Is she sure that John Bowley, that's the John Bowley that's her dad? And she messaged back, said, yes, Pat was her mom. And after she was born, Pat and the daughter moved back to Louisiana where they were from, and she was raised there. And I said, okay, let me try and tell you this. John is not your dad. John had a vasectomy in 1975. So he can't be your dad. I'm not sure who your dad would be because, like I said, we used to party a lot. Gail's got the calendar out looking to see when was she born, But she and I developed a really good relationship. And come to find out, Pat told her that John stayed with her. She got pregnant. So John married her so that the baby would have a name. And they named the baby Bonnie Joe Bowley. Bonnie for his sister and Joe for me. That's how she came about that name. And I finally tracked down one of John's nieces down by St. Mary's and found out he was in the VA in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Had been there for a couple years. Like, wow. So Bonnie lived out in Waco, Texas. And his son, who he had not seen since he was a little baby, lived outside of Waco. So John's in Parkersburg in the VA. So I make a trip down to Parkersburg. And I go into the VA, the receptionist there, and I said, I'm looking for John Bowley. And she's like, oh, Johnny B? I'm like, oh, shit, man. Yeah, that's what he called it. Yeah, that's what he was. And I'm like, yeah. She's like, he's here. So I'm like, wow. Everybody knew Johnny B. Right? And I told her I was Joe Waller and everything. So she went, had somebody go tell John that I was there. And somebody else came out and said, you're Joe? And I'm like, yeah. He said, that's all John talks about is what him and Joe used to do all the time down in Houston. I'm like, oh my God. Everybody there knew who I was because, John's like me. He's just a lovable guy. He was mean and nasty, but if you knew him, he was so likable and just wanted everybody laughed. We always, that was our survival tool, I think. We made everybody laugh all the time. It made it easier on us. And sure enough, I saw John and, he had about 6 weeks left to live, I found out, which was pretty bad. And we went and had lunch and, they signed him out with me so I could take him to go get lunch. He was in a wheelchair then. And his cousin or his niece had come up to Parkersburg so that we all went to lunch. Well, John at 60-some years old, they're in the van I had a van then, crushing up pills and snorting pills. That's their life. I mean, that's what they did. So John really wanted to see his son, and his son didn't have a whole lot of money, and he wanted to see Bonnie Joe. So I cleared it with the VA, and I bought John a plane ticket from Parkersburg to the VA hospital in Dallas. And they took him there. And that way, Johnny, his son, John Jr., and Bonnie could drive up every couple of weeks. They'd drive up to Dallas and go visit John until he passed. And he died in 2010. And what made me think of this, I saw one of the posts I had made all the way back in 2010, right? John's sister was also a Vietnam veteran. They are buried side by side at Arlington. I'm like, wow, I'm sure brothers are buried there, but I wonder how many brothers and sisters are buried at Arlington. But yeah, there's John and Bonnie, their headstones. And I was touched by that. I was touched that he, you know, that our time together, although not real long, you know, but I mean, over the course of 30 years, uh, we knew each other and had contacted each other even after we went our separate ways. We kind of stayed in contact some, but that, he enjoyed those times so much that that's all he talked about with everybody at the VA. And his the medals he got, he was awarded. Like I said, I think he was most proud of his combat infantryman badge. But I have a picture. I mean, I have his Silver Star, I have his Bronze Star, I have his awards. And when I died, those are going to his son. I'm not ready to relinquish them yet, although they should go to his son. But I never had a friend like that. I never will. I know that we had so many of the same experiences and the same issues mentally that, and I told his son, look, I will send these when I die and make sure all this comes to you. But one of the things I have that is one of my most prized possessions is a picture of John in a hospital ward with Omar Bradley pinning his Bronze Star on his chest. Omar Bradley was one of my favorite generals of all time. And to me, that picture is as valuable to me as, anything I own. It's as valuable as my kids. I mean, no matter what. That's what I think of that picture. That's how important that is to me. So, yeah, I think about John often. I think about Bonnie. I still am in contact with his niece. She's finally got herself straightened up. She's not doing the drugs anymore. I kind of like support her and help her out with that till she could get past all the problems. She married some guy now, and they're doing pretty good, I reckon. But yeah, that's my story of John and Houston, Texas. It was a blast, and I talk about him probably just as much as he talked about me. Especially as I'm getting older. Those were like the glory days of my life. We just had so much fun, and we raised so much hell down there in Houston. It was crazy. But like I said, I deleted my Facebook and I downloaded all the pictures. And as I'm going through stuff to make sure I saved all the pictures, I ran across those pictures of John and Bonnie's headstones. That made me think of him. He died December 1st, 2010. And yeah. He was a good guy. You wouldn't know it if you didn't know him. If you didn't know him, you'd swear he was an asshole. But I think people think that about me until they get to know me too. Neither one of us hold anything back. We tell it like we see it. We don't sugarcoat anything. If you ask me a question, I will tell you exactly how I feel or what I think. I'm not going to try to, like I said, sugarcoat anything. And that's what John was. We were just straight up. And people appreciate it. There's not enough of those people around anymore. If you know what I mean. But anyway, I got to get back to work. I'm so happy I got 7 of those flats out of 1 roll. So I only have to do 4 rolls. And we're ready to staple up insulation. But hope you enjoyed the chat. I'm going to get these things finished up, and I'll try to get this uploaded tonight. It is getting dark out there. You can see behind me. Not much light coming through the barn anymore. I love these lights out here. Anyway, sorry this took so long, but I hope you enjoyed it. If you stuck around, remember to like, share, comment. Do all those kind of things. And I will see you all tomorrow after I go to work in the house. I'm out.